What is happening? How are you today, Phil?
Hey, I'm good. I'm alive and I haven't shot anybody yet. It's a good
Sweet,
day
me
so far.
either. Me either. I have also not shot anybody yet, so that's good.
Yeah.
Um, we had another little cold snap here after some nice warm weather, but other than that, it's pretty nice. Did you guys get some of the snowmageddon that fell on the western part of the country?
I don't know. It seemed like a normal day.
Okay, yeah, no, sounds good. Well, the Pinkos in Portland, they lose their minds. They don't know how to function, and all the Southern California people that moved to be communists in Portland, they're all freaking out. So the Columbia River Gorge was all shut down for a couple of days, and all the more reason you should have a go bag in your car, get home
Yeah.
bag.
Well, I suppose the knife that I'll never order from Benchmade probably didn't get shipped out then. But that has more to do with the fact that I will never give them any of my money again.
Man, that's
Less
for
to do with
sure.
the fact that they shut down from a quarter inch of snow.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, they get no more money from me either. In fact, my
Same with
nephew.
Leatherman and Leupold
Yeah.
and Warren. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Warren, yeah,
Get out of
especially,
Oregon or
yep, yep.
you get my money.
Warren at least is a non-affiliated, like they don't have anything to do with defense. They don't have anything. I mean, they're just a company of gears and motors. Like I mean, they can be wherever they want to be. I'm just their product's overpriced. That's the primary reason that I don't want to buy from them. So
Yeah.
they do make a good and see, you know what? That's the problem, right? That is the problem. Whether you're talking about Carhartt, whether you're talking about Leatherman, whether you're talking about Leupold, whether Warren and Benchmade, they're
So the
all
problem with Born is that there's not a lot of viable alternatives. Every other one of those you've mentioned, there are very good, as good, or better alternatives. Super Winch makes a good winch, but it's not as good as a Warren.
sure,
Um, Chinesium Badlands. One, they're Chinesium Badlands, and Super Winch is made in China too.
sure.
Um, the one thing I
Smitty
can
built.
say about Warren is, despite the fact that they're made in communist Oregon, at least as of today, that is still a part of these United States.
Well, and the one thing I would say, I do think that
But
Warren is the
Smitty built, I
best.
have not run into to be a viable alternative outside of certain segments. So they have the Jeep segment covered pretty well. Maybe even the light truck, right? The kind
Sure.
of half ton category. So
Yes.
8,000 to 10,000 or under. But if you
Yes.
need something above 15,000, or you know, down in the 2,500 to 6,500 range, right?
Yeah.
Smitty built really doesn't do it well.
Yeah. 15. I
So
believe 15 is the cap for Smitty built. Yes. 15 is their biggest winch.
yeah, so I'm running a 15 heavy case, and it's a Warren.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, and so going back to Leatherman, I mean, I mean, Gerber's Portland too, so Kershaw's Portland
but
too.
I don't have Gerber in lieu of Leatherman. Um,
Right.
but
I mean, I
Leatherman,
think
it used to be
Sog's made
Gerber
in
made a
Portland.
superior. I have no idea about SOG. I ran SOG when the Department of Defense was paying for it,
Sure.
and I still have a couple. But what's in my go-to, go to war bag right now is a Mutt.
Yeah,
So Leatherman really did step up their game into the specialty market.
they did.
Over the last years, they have perfected their EOD line, and frontline defensive gun specific type tasks. They have nailed that down pretty well.
They really
So
have, and I think that the integration of screwdriver bits, the way Leatherman has done that, is superb. I mean, they they,
I
they
like
are
the
the
new
they are
one.
the best.
And Sog had it. Sog had it for a long time,
Hmm.
way better. And Gerber and Leatherman were kind of just okay. They would break if you had to use them. You couldn't count
Sure,
on them.
sure.
And the new ones are pretty good. But again, a Leatherman, any sort of multi tools never should be your first response. It should be your I have no other choice response.
Exactly.
If you use one on a regular basis, then you're probably doing something wrong, incorrectly. And no matter how good they are, and they are way better than they used to be, they are not meant for constant um, use when it comes to those little tools and things like that. They're meant for
Correct.
I have another choice.
Yeah.
They don't move sites well, but they'll work if you forgot your site tool. Like
Right.
if you have one screw that just absolutely has to happen, there's a good chance you can only do that 2-3 times before you break the tool.
Sure.
But
Sure.
carry tools.
Well, I
That is a
would
real thing.
say, I would say,
Magnesium
well,
piece of crap tool from what's that place you like? The Chinesium company that sells. We don't have them in Alaska. Badlands Winch guys. Those.
no, I don't like them. No. What are you telling me? What are you saying that I like them?
You
I don't
don't.
like them. No.
I'm
No,
pretty
I
sure
don't
you
have
got a whole truck full of Harbor Freight tools.
That's the other. That's the other Kirk. That's the other one. There's another. There's another one.
Oh, it's the
And
other. That's
that's
old
the other.
Kirk. This one's grown
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. So no. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So hey, man. How's your week going? How's the world of prepping and the whys
Well,
and
it's
all those
Friday,
things?
so typically we record on Thursdays,
Yes.
and I do Thursdays than I am on Fridays.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And I was
But I got
acquiring a
my
prep yesterday during the during the show. So when we would normally be recording. So and it was one of those
people
buy
are
on
starting to get a
Facebook
little more
Marketplace things.
on edge in the community,
Mm-hmm.
and so I spend a lot of time in a local gun store, and the tone of the average buyer has changed.
I bet.
So,
Especially in Alaska. I think the proximity that you have to Russia and China is different than the rest of
I
this
don't
country.
run into so obviously that's a common conversation, and I've yet to run into anybody who considers Russia a significant threat here in Alaska. Quite honestly, our own federal government is far more of a serious and immediate threat
Agreed.
than China or Russia.
Agreed.
The fact that the federal law enforcement officers, be they IRS, ATF, Postal Service, or federal fishing game, wildlife
Yep.
management, refuge police, all those entities are carrying guns where
Yep.
we live
Yep.
and ammunition, again, including the Postal Service.
Yep.
So we feel very outnumbered here.
Sure.
And I would say that the tone that I'm witnessing is far more of the average person is armoring and arming up
Yep.
to meet the current and legitimate threat.
Absolutely.
Because
100%.
there's a term that we use in the military communities. It was kind of coined last 5 or 6 years is called a near peer. You've heard of this near peer?
No.
The near peer threat means that the person coming in opposition to you, the threat, is as good or better armed and equipped than you are. So,
Okay.
despite the fact that there's video after video, FBI breach teams literally unable to open a front door in Alaska.
Sure.
They are showing up with night vision. They do have a lot of money to buy legitimately good shit. Now, whether they actually have the capability to use it or not, that is up for debate.
Right.
As those who took their oath seriously have massively exited these agencies over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But they do have the tools. So, as a newly acquainted friend of mine says, the majority of these federal idiots are just going to be a loot drop for us.
Sure. Absolutely.
Which I appreciate.
Yep.
So
I agree.
It's why I'm considering a 9mm platform, because I know they're all carrying a bunch of 9mm on them now.
Or you just wait till you acquire one.
Buy the things. But I don't want one of theirs. I want one that I know that it works and I've tested it, and then I'll just take their ammunition and use it.
Yeah, there you go.
Because when you run up against an incompetent enemy, you can't necessarily trust their tools, but I'll take their accessories.
Agreed.
So,
agreed.
Again, do not be confused. The legitimate threat to Americans right now is from within.
Yeah.
Do not be distracted by the fact that the mainstream media is trying to tell you about China and Russia, and all of these other places, the domestic enemy is a far more immediate and legitimate threat, and they are near peer.
Well,
So
I would
you
say
don't
that
have night vision and body armor, you need it. If you
yes,
don't have gas masks, you need
you
them.
need it. Hmm.
And those are things that they are moving now to try to make illegal for our citizenry to own.
Absolutely.
So you need to get
Absolutely.
those things.
Yep. That 100%. I completely agree. The one thing that I would say, we've talked about on the show, and I kind of rail quite a bit. As I think that one of the reasons we're being driven to the brink of World War III is so that they can keep us from rising up. You heard, and I'm no Marjorie Taylor Greene fan. She's just because she's on the right doesn't mean she's smart. She's a weirdo. But she started the conversation the other day about a national
Oh,
divorce.
she's Southern.
You and I have to
I agree
right.
with her. What she
I,
said there.
we have talked about a national divorce before. John Lovell made a video talking about national divorce.
I just watched that this morning.
Yeah, and I thought he had a pretty middle of the road.
Say catch it all.
Yeah, I didn't get to finish it.
Did he? I was wondering which way he went.
I missed the last 3 minutes maybe, so I don't know if he came to a more
Oh,
definitive
I
point.
caught
But I
the
mean,
last like 1 or 2 minutes in the first 1 minute, but I missed the whole middle. So
he
I was making coffee.
he landed where I've landed in the past, where like the rest of the world is not going to allow 50 nuclear power, countries to pop up tomorrow, and nuclear capable countries to pop up
Well,
tomorrow. That
I think that's short sighted. One, we're not 50 separate nations, and on top of that, not all 50 of us have nuclear power. So,
right, right. But
there are
there's
not
a lot of
all of
nuclear
them
power in
in the
red states
States.
though.
Yeah, well, again, so if you've not discovered the YouTube channel S2 Underground,
S2
that's a
underground.
place that you need to go.
Okay.
And he brought some good points a while back. It was about 6 months ago.
Okay.
And that, again, our largest threat is the fact that our military has ushered out the door those in the oath that is taken.
Correct.
And for the last, well, not just from the Fauci that you're referencing,
Mm-hmm.
but due to immunity and other bullshit that has been implemented over the last 15 years.
Right.
So under the guise of wokeism and equality and
Right.
other bullshit concepts that sat underneath are absolute garbage and racist at their core.
Yeah.
They have just diminished the readiness of our military, and they have tailored a group of actively serving snowflakes that come from this Gen Z generation,
Yeah.
that are fully indoctrinated and absolutely will obey lawful orders.
Yeah.
They're led by probably the most woke general we've had in our history, the most communist general, Milley, who's
Yeah.
an absolute piece of shit garbage.
Absolutely.
And
100%.
I mean, again, as S2 Underground pointed out, the largest threat to date in our country is actually what Milley did back in 2020 when
Right.
he removed the football powers from our president because he
Right.
didn't agree with the politics of
Yep.
the currently serving president
Right.
at that time. So
Yep.
he and Pelosi and the team behind Biden, which is largely the Obama team,
Right.
they actively committed a coup against our nation
Yeah.
to ensure, as they said, a smooth transition of power in the direction they wanted
Sure.
before the election was settled, and in many
Right.
ways influenced the election. If you want to know the people who are behind, Twitter's common in our culture right now, but the reality is it is the most minor of election influence that took place.
Oh,
What
for
happened on Instagram and Meta and Facebook and in our mainstream media and in other YouTube and Google was
Right.
far more egregious.
Far more.
Far more.
Yeah. No,
So,
well, but my point
as
was that
the
we're standing on the edge of
CIA
World War III.
operative who is S2 Underground, he points out the enemy from within is by far the more immediate
Right.
and um, capable enemy.
Okay.
And so that's
But
where you need to wake up and equip yourselves
no,
from
I
within.
totally agree with you. I totally agree with you, and I totally agree with him. And that's why I think that they will take us to a World War III scenario, not because those countries are a viable threat to us on the mainland, but look at all the atrocities that they have been able to accomplish and the limitations of freedom that they've been able to accomplish every time we end up in a major conflict. Look at the Patriot Act, right? I mean, the only reason they were able to ram the Patriot Act, one of the single greatest reductionist scenario of freedom in our country's history, was because the nation was afraid. They chose to worship at the altar of fear, and they thought that they were going to be able to attain security, and so they allowed the Patriot Act to become a thing because they were afraid. Look at the atrocities that were done in this country on the mainland during World War II, to Japanese, native born, Americans that were just happen to have the wrong
I
skin color.
disagree with the word atrocity. I think you are overpainting atrocity. What terrible? What happened in Europe was an atrocity. What happened in our country was
Well,
just
there
really
are
mean and really
degrees
racist,
of
really fear
atrocity.
driven. Yes, I'll allow that for sure and agree with you. My we need more words, right, to paint that
The
spectrum,
English language is
um,
quite limited. Yes,
because
I agree.
it is. Let's just switch to Hebrew.
Let's
Have
switch.
no
Let's
vowels.
switch to Hebrew. Exactly
Um,
right. Exactly right. When
Greek's
I
way
can
better.
love pasta, my wife and my mother with the same word, we've got a problem.
Context matters,
Context
which is why
matters.
so many people take the Bible, screw up the Bible.
Oh,
I
so
bought a
badly.
shirt the other day. It said, "I can do all three. I can do all things through a verse that has been widely taken out of context." What a great shirt! What a
That's
great shirt!
fantastic. That's a
I'm
great
looking to
shirt.
put it on a mug. Actually, I should have it for the show. I can do all things through verses that are taken out of context.
Agreed.
Um, but back to the point. Yeah, we there are times out of national necessity where we have to do things that are um, potentially morally wrong, but they're less wrong than other things.
Correct.
Um, the reality with the Japanese is that they had been planting operatives in our country
Sure.
for a long time,
Sure.
and it was difficult to discern who was who. But we also had people from the Japanese Empire that looked like Japanese who were here escaping the Japanese,
Sure.
and they got to the next.
And
As
we
far
also
as I
had three
know,
generation
help me out here. We took
Americans that were
land, we took
patriots.
right, we restricted their rights. We restricted their rights. We took land and assets. I'm sure some women got raped. I'm sure some families got separated. But did we massively torture them? Did we not free and give reparations afterwards? I mean,
Not to the ones we killed.
huge differences. And well, but how did we kill them? Did we kill them by
Well, I
sticking
think,
them in a camp and starving them? Did we
yeah,
kill them
yeah, we did.
by gassing
Yeah,
them?
yes, we did. We stuck them in camps and we starved them. Yeah, at least 3,000 people died of starvation in Tule Lake alone. So that was one of the only concentration camps that actually we got numbers out of. Yeah, there were people who died under starvation because, quite frankly, they American people were clamoring for groceries during World War II. They absolutely did not care about the caloric intake of concentration camp people. We were over fighting uh, somebody for rounding up a certain ethnic group of people and putting them in concentration camps and letting them die and
Well,
murdering
no,
them.
it, but no. Yeah, ultimately that's why we were there, and later we found out that that was a large reason why we were there. But to be honest, we didn't go into World War II knowing that that was happening.
No, no, we went into World War
What
II
we knew
because
is
we
that they
we
were
got the crap kicked
occupying
out of
our
us at Pearl
allies,
Harbor.
they were taking ground, and they were and a lot of it was retribution. You're right.
Right.
Which
Right.
again,
And the only reason I bring it up,
so
and I mean,
let's
and
flip the
we
tables
could
then,
debate
and
this.
when
We could,
China comes and bombs Anchorage, right? So
right.
doing it now, looking at it again, assuming or let's actually do a more probable thing. Let's say China comes in and takes out Seattle or LA, right? One of those cities would be more probable now. Um, will we round up the Chinese, anyone who looks Chinese, and stick them in a camp to start figuring out who is or who isn't an operative?
Well, we
And
did
the
after
reality
9/11.
is the average Democrat operative,
True.
the average Democrat is more of an effective operative than Chinese plant. And
For sure.
there are agents working for and supporting um, anti-American, which is pro-China and Russia and multiple. They're not the only threats in the world against
No,
us. A
no.
large majority of the world hates us,
Any BRICS nation is our enemy at
and
this
they're
point.
flooding over the border
Correct.
and being welcomed in under our student programs and various um, globalism-based treaties.
Well, that
Right?
brings
We
me
we
that.
bring Saudis here, and we bring
Yep.
Koreans here, and we
Yep.
train them. We still put the best training on in the world in just about everything.
Sure.
So
Well, that actually brings me to one of our headlines that I wanted to talk about today, and that is the fact
yeah.
that I don't know. You tell me whether I've gone too far down the rabbit hole or I've got too much tinfoil wrapped around my head at this point. But I mean, are we up to 5 or 6 major train derailments with massive chemical spills in this country now in the last 3 weeks? Like that is not
So I
normal.
that is a tough one to tell because but that is the thing is it is somewhat normal. So are we in one of those what's it called? It's a something bias. It's basically something terrible happens and then you just start to pay attention to it and we sort of lose track of the fact that it happened all the time.
Confirmation
That's
bias?
a certain type of bias. And confirmation bias, it could be that could be. Um, that is a good question. And I'm not sure we have good answers because we do have pretty terrible things like that happen constantly
Sure.
through the incompetence of the average unelected government official, through the incompetence of the fact that we have very little accountability for our safety rules in our country, um, largely, again, due to the absolute incompetence of the EPA, who is off environmental uh, committing acts of terrorism against our nation instead of focusing on things that actually matter. So they are far more concerned about somebody spearing a whale somewhere else, right? They're
Right.
so caught up in their own ridiculous indoctrinated stupidity that they don't focus on things that matter.
Right.
And what I'm gathering again, and my experience here is somewhat limited. I've got a headline regarding the same subject I'd like to read as well. But
Go for it.
have you looked at some of the railways that are going in Ohio? Like they're so god awful. It's like
Oh, it's the
they're
reason
just a
why
condition.
they were trying to strike. It's the reason why railroad workers were trying to strike before Christmas, and the Biden administration, who are supposedly a populist administration, a labor
I
based.
believe Trump
Uh,
talked them out of striking too, though. Let's be fair here, right?
I didn't know Trump had
They've
anything to
been
do with it. I didn't know Trump
complaining
had anything to
for
do with it, but
I remember it happening because they're
I
not the
know
only
that
because
the
the
Democrat House and Senate basically crushed their ability to strike, and they were only striking primarily because there weren't enough workers, the safety conditions were
yeah
trash, and they knew that major
yeah.
tragedy was on the way.
So a lot of the infrastructure is paid for through government grants, right?
Right.
The maintaining of the railways, all of that, and that money just continues to get squandered because the government is not the best person to do anything. They're so
Correct.
incredibly corrupt and inefficient.
Correct.
They waste money. They reward incompetence. They hire through culture instead of competency. Right? You don't have to be qualified to get hired. You have to wear a skirt, um,
Yep.
or you have to paint your nails and steal dresses. because
Correct.
that's how you get hired under our current administration. And to
Correct.
be fair, it's been that way for a long time. It's
Oh
been
yeah.
that way since about midway through the Clintons,
Yeah.
and it's only gotten worse every single election because it's this angry animal that feeds from within,
Correct.
always getting larger, never getting smaller. And that's the true enemy, is to attack that animal
Hmm.
because they protect their own. So
Yeah.
what we're seeing is the fallout from that. There's, same thing with bridges, right? We had a bridge collapse a couple years ago and everybody
Yep.
screamed and cried. Well,
Yep.
that problem has not gone away. It is
No.
still there.
No.
And
Yeah.
throwing trillions of dollars at it is not the fix.
Our infrastructure is trash, and it is primarily trash because of bureaucracy. That is the only
Yes.
reason. They're passing the
We
money
hired the
around.
lowest bidding contractor
Mhm.
who was allowed to bid. So as a federal contractor myself, who's very familiar with the contracting system and the rules and ridiculousness of it, there's a process that even allows you to bid, and we allow competition just enough to give the appearance of a quality system, but it is absolute trash. And it's more fair in Mexico, where you can at least see the bribes.
Sure.
And it's admitted that the bribes work, but we absolutely have a system driven by bribes here as well.
100%. 100%. If it's not the bribe of actual physical money, it's the bribe of political favor down the road.
Well, what we saw it is, so when with that cryptocurrency money laundering scheme, that is largely how a lot of things get done in the federal contracting system. Ridiculous amounts of money. You're going to make this donation to here, and then they're going to turn around, launder it for you, and donate it back the other way. And then you're going to make sure that that contract gets hired.
Yep.
It
Yep.
happens. Here's the other way that the Democrats do it, because this is actually in the headlines right now. There's another, I don't want to screw up the number, it's like $7 or $8 billion that's going to be handed out this year to groups for the efforts of conservation. And if you don't know what conservation of land is, it sounds amazing, but what
Sounds
it
wonderful.
really is it's a tool for the a person will acquire land or not acquire land, or even just think about acquiring the land.
Yep.
And then they will get money from the federal government to forever save through conservation that land. But then they're still allowed to occupy it and use it. They just no longer really own it, except they do own. They sell a bundle of the rights for way more than the land is worth.
Right.
Then they pocket that money and spend it. And in the
Yes.
end, it's done under the guise of saving fish or saving land or saving the trees or preserving wildlife, right? That is all bullshit.
Right.
It is all bullshit. And what it really is doing is taking fee simple private ownership of land and putting it into federal hands, while allowing the right person of the right political persuasion to still use it, abuse it, and do whatever the frick they want out there.
Yes.
Except now they have an extra $1 million in their pocket.
Yes.
Which, again, the persons who are getting these grants, just like at Twitter, 90% donate significant amounts of money to Democrat candidates.
Absolutely.
Which is how they get approved for the grants in the first place. It is one of the most corrupt systems I've seen. It's rampant in Alaska.
Oh, you guys have it. I think you have it overhand worse than most places.
It's not more than anywhere else, because the swath, you can go to the national headlines. I'm trying to remember who it was. It's either Green Street, Biz Now, or one of those was bragging about it this week, about the $6 or $7 billion in conservation grants, and almost none of that's earmarked for Alaska this time. It's this huge swath of private lands through the Rockies.
Yeah.
So, right, BLM's been in a land grab for a long time.
Yes.
They're taking more private land and turning it into federal refuge lands, meaning you can't do anything on it. You're not even allowed to set foot on it.
Right.
So again, there's a huge land grab happening. It's not just Chinese that are grabbing land. Our own ugly government employees, unelected officials who feed this monstrous system,
yep,
are the biggest threat to our nation. We are being
But
subverted from within.
one
So
hundred percent.
the other headline, why don't you go ahead if you have a thought on that? Because my
No, no, no.
headline's
I
a
was just
bit.
agreeing. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
My headline was it was releasing as I was walking into the studio, so I was reading it. There are two independent research firms, one at Texas A&M University and the other at Carnegie Mellon University, which Carnegie Mellon is known for their grounds in the fields of health. They have both come out with a statement today admitting that, and I'm trying to get it to it. They found over 50 chemicals present in the derailed East Palestine area, and they're saying all who let's see, the substance of acrolein was has a pungent odor. It's highly toxic. The levels continue to be of huge concern. Those that were tested, and again, I'm trying to get a scope because I don't see how many people they're saying. It's just saying those exposed to it not may, will have long-term health side effects,
Right.
and some in the term will begin to die from this.
Yep.
So we have confirmation that once again the EPA, the CDC, the ugly enemy from within, the monster, have absolutely lied to the American people.
Absolutely.
Their lies have cost lives and families, which again, they are the enemy.
Yeah.
They're, make no mistake, they are the enemy.
They are.
And the war that they are in, we talk constantly on our show about a cold civil war. And I'm becoming more convinced that it's maybe less cold because the threat of violence is certainly there, even if they're not necessarily committing it in ways that we see. I'm starting to agree with those calling it a fifth generation warfare, in that what defines a fifth generation warfare as opposed to third and fourth, which is more traditional third and even, second being World War I style, third being World War II style, which actually held through Korea and most of Vietnam, four being more of an air power, Desert
Yep.
Storm, Desert Shield, and the other, right? Fifth generation actually involves much more in cyber, in silent subversion. It's your CIA war. It's your covert war. It's the fact that you don't know that you're at war. You know something's wrong. You feel threatened. Your way of life is changing. Your rights are changing. Your life is being affected, but you're not sure how to fight it because what we should be calling it is the frog war, right? It's the
Right.
hot frog war,
Right.
boiling water war.
For
So
sure.
what we're in is an active fifth generation warfare. And we don't necessarily know who's pulling the strings, but that's indicative of that type and description of war, is
Right.
that we're not sure exactly who the enemy is. We know
Yep.
we can identify multiple threats, but it's hard to find a single enemy. It's hard to follow a single chain of command or effect. And so as thus it's hard to fight and it's hard to hold accountability. So what gets confused is we think fifth generation means stealth, because fifth generation in relation to fighter aircraft is
Right.
like a sensor warship. But a true fifth era war or fifth gen warfare, fifth whatever, is things like Chinese lasers mapping out our threats.
Sure.
Our own government allowing sensors that are poking and prodding for where to best implement an EMP attack, allowing those to actually happen
Yes.
before we shoot them down.
Yes.
Shooting down multiple things and then not telling the masses why or when or what. So
Yeah.
we're not really telling anyone that they shouldn't be afraid because we got this. In fact, quite the opposite. What we're witnessing is, again, that own incompetent millennial military, Gen Z military, making mistakes that those of us who do have combat service, which is not them, because we haven't really been in active combat for the last 8 years or so.
Yeah.
Again, that number could float. I'd have to narrow that down, but just like what happened prior to the Gulf War, we get to a point where those who are serving in leadership and in the middle ranks and certainly the lower ranks, that's a given, don't have actual combat experience, or if they do, they don't have it in the type of warfare that's happening.
Yes.
And we're back to that point. Those of us that do have combat experience in a similar war, our Gen Xers served during the Cold War, which
Right.
had aspects of this generation warfare that we're talking about.
Right.
There was a lot happening, cyber warfare, subversion techniques and tactics,
Sure.
embedded misinformation. Right? It's what you think of from spy novels and
Sure.
movies.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah.
that's
Nowadays they
what's
move
happening,
ones and
and
zeros
so
around. Back then they would forge and wipe out bank accounts, with with falsehoods and forgeries. I mean, it's just same. It's just a little more legwork.
and now they commit well, and so what we saw in the Kenosha riots that started to come out in the trial with Rittenhouse is
Right.
that at the time the FBI had active drones circling over Kenosha, and
Yes.
they were watching and filming the entire
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
And so, if you caught what was happening during that trial, there was one side trying to use some of that footage
Yep.
because it exonerated Rittenhouse. And
Sure.
of course, our incredibly corrupt district attorneys in our country won't allow any evidence that actually supports truth. They
Right.
only want evidence that supports a win for them. They're not interested in truth, they're interested in wins.
Yes.
So they sided with the federal government, who, of course, did not want that information released because they were mapping out who was doing what and identifying targets. Because
For
if
sure.
you don't know this, we've been flying drones, Predator aircraft, and other over American soil now since the Patriot Act.
Hmm.
The technology that we have now is that they can fly at 20 or 30,000 feet where you don't know that there is something flying,
Sure.
and they can look at your hand even at night and show you what is in your hand.
Yep.
The facial recognition technology will allow them to identify who the
Absolutely.
person is. There's almost nothing happening in our country that is not to a high level of detail.
Being surveyed.
So
Well, let me give you an example.
we
Let me
are,
speak to
and
that
that's what they Snowden released.
because I was just recently in. I'm just going to say a major American city. Just within the last 2 months, I was in a major American city visiting some friends. And one of the friends that I have is a high ranking law enforcement officer. So I'll just say high ranking law enforcement officer inside of a major American city and leave it at that. Okay.
Okay.
And he was, and we were talking about some of the stuff that you and I talk about on the show, and some of the stuff that the rabbit holes that we go down, and I was talking about federalization of officers, and how everybody that I know, just cannot stand the FBI and da 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 and all this other stuff. And he was like, "Wow, man, I just really haven't experienced any of that stuff." I mean, like right now, the FBI is getting ready to install for us drone launchers on top of the buildings that all the major buildings in our metro area, in our metroplex, so that we can launch from any portion of the city that we want and instantly have air
And land in
vis
charge, and yeah, yeah.
all of that stuff, and that they're going to provide all that equipment for us, and it's going to be, man, it's going to really help keep our officers safe, and we're going to be able to really do a lot better job. And I go, and I didn't even have to say it. I love it. I mean, I was like, I was stunned that this was coming out, like as a positive from a dear friend of mine who's not a leftist. He just isn't awake, and his wife is sitting across the room, and I don't remember what she was doing. She was doing something, and she looks up and she's like, "Sounds great on paper until someone we don't want to control it controls it." And it just stopped my buddy like in his tracks. And
Person funding it and installing it. Yeah,
there it is. And so
yeah.
so 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 basically what I took away from that is They absolutely have plans to install their little launching domes that are going to contain
Yeah,
and charge.
the dome opens up.
Yep.
The drone device
Yes.
is sitting there in its
Yes.
cradle,
Yes.
charging,
And it's
and then it can
probably
take
going to be
off.
a
It can fly.
it's probably going to be a 3 drone unit inside of the dome so that they can rotate them
Sure.
during battery cycles. Okay, so they'll send one drone, it'll circle the area, it'll do the things that they want it to do, and then another will fly out. When it's in place, that one will return to back to its launch pad so it can plug
Right.
back in and charge. And then you got
They
it's
had the
probably
ability to have constant on station, 100% coverage,
absolutely
no loss of data.
absolutely no loss of
I
data.
had this
So
technology for a long time.
they've had it for a long time, but the fact that it's now being openly talked about as a positive, like we're getting, check out what we're getting, this is going to be great. And again, I'll say it again, I
This is the
bleed
type of
blue.
generation. Yeah.
I bleed blue. I
Well,
support
so
I support
this is what we
local law
used
enforcement.
in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is what we used in our battlefield.
Yes.
What has happened is we are no longer, so that machine is dialed up and cranking all that stuff out, right? Because we're using it abroad.
Yeah.
Well, now we're using it domestically because we're not using it abroad
Yep.
anymore.
Right.
And just like you saw a bunch of military vehicles get DRMO'd out to the civilian world, I mean, show me a law enforcement agency that didn't get a free rolling tank, right?
Right. They all got
If
RVs.
they wanted one, they got one.
They all got
They
RVs.
all got them.
100%.
The same thing with all these other capabilities. If you don't know, the average police car vehicle, under the guise of money to put cameras in, right? So we can have records, because everybody wanted to have a record of everything. Everybody's got to have a camera on them now.
Yep.
Well, but with those cameras came the ability to read and constantly scan plates, faces,
Yep.
and vehicle IDs, because for the last what is it now, 10 years, all
Yep.
vehicles produced have to have a computer that can be shut down remotely.
Right.
What do you think for clunkers? One of the biggest thing there was getting rid of all those vehicles that didn't meet that new standard.
There it is, right there.
Again,
Absolutely.
the average American, when offered a free tax stamp, will do it.
Yep.
You're surrendering your freedom
Absolutely.
entirely because they
And
know that you will.
what most people
Because they
don't
can
want to.
pay the $200 in front of your face,
Sure.
and you'll do it.
Well, let's face it. Most people will go down and fill out the tax stamp and pay the money. I've tried. Didn't quite work out for me. I was going to do it myself. It didn't work out. I didn't end up getting to do that. But the bottom line is, I'm glad that it didn't, because what most people don't realize, that as soon as you get an NFA item, you have essentially forfeited your right to privacy. They can walk up. They don't need a warrant. I want to see that NFA item, because that is a special permit. Okay, so I'm really glad I didn't end up doing it. Other people are like, that's fine, I'll just kill them when they come to the door. Whatever, you know what I mean? But I just assume not be on any registries. I just don't want to be. I mean, I already am. Let's face it. I mean, I'm on this show. They know exactly who I am, you know. But as far as like let me say it this way: I don't want to pay for it. You know, I'm
If you've
not
ever
gonna.
filled out a 4473, they know about every firearm that you bought from a firearms dealer.
Well, and that was proven last year. You're absolutely right. That was proven last year, that the 4473 process was 100% an ipso facto gun registry. Like it just was.
They've been found out so many times that they're not even denying it anymore. So,
Correct.
yeah,
Correct.
I don't know that I could run into very many people that are actually capable of being 100% under the radar. There are ways to do it. It's not a fun way to live, but once you're in, it's hard to get out. And you know, we're used to our creature comforts. So you know, there's a lot of different ways to handle that. There's a lot of different tactics
Right.
to either get off the list or minimize your risk of being on the list. There are gray man studies, right, to lower your chances. There's obviously opportunities to relocate and to change your lifestyle, and
Yeah.
there are a lot of different directions you go, and it's interesting to see the directions other people go, and again,
Yes.
there are some people also that are under the, well, we'll just shoot them on dick when they show up and fuck them. I mean, I like those guys,
Yeah,
but
those are good guys.
the thing is, now they have robots, and now they have a drone flying overhead that you didn't even know about, that
Yep.
has the FLIR no one is allowed to own, right?
Right.
Anything that you're allowed to buy as a civilian, um, know at least 10 times better that you're not allowed to buy. But
That's exactly
I'm
right.
watching, as I'm attempting to kind of get a second and third setup here. Um, I'm watching actively the sites that sell these things restrict who they will sell it to. More
Yes.
and more body armor places,
Yep.
designating places,
Yep.
the good gear that is civilian legal.
Sure.
There are places that are self-policing, probably under threat, because
Yep.
that's how the government works. We won't buy that big contract from you to hook up the army that we're mobilizing for Ukraine. You'll lose that $100 million contract to give us laser designators, right? If you
Yep.
sell to civilians.
Yep.
So without having to even have a law, we have, through threats and influence,
Sure. It's
already
control.
restricted.
You don't need a law if you have control.
It's control. So again, there's an enemy from within, and which is why I say, does the average person need to have night vision, body armor, things like that, right? Do you need a laser designator? And the
Yes.
answer on all of these high-speed Razoo multiples of $10,000 items is maybe, maybe
Yep.
not, maybe, probably. But but again, as my new acquaintance says, don't just become a loot drop. So if you can't draw from concealment and put a round in the 10 zone in
Yes.
under 1.1, 1.2 seconds,
Yep.
don't buy night vision, buy
Right.
ammunition,
Right.
right?
Right.
There's depends. Depends is still the answer for a lot of these things. And I agree with that. It's frustrating to hear. I've been
Sure.
a gear snob. I've been, that normal civilian guy. Well, I've never really been that. You need to train.
Yeah.
And what we do have is a lack of good places to train. I know that in my local area, in the 300-mile range that I have researched, there is not a single place that I could take competent training
Yeah.
on any of this.
Yeah.
And I say that with all authority.
Sure.
If I show up to one of those classes, I'll be the most qualified in the class.
Yep.
Why would I pay them?
Yep.
Some of the
Well,
scary stuff that you see, the average
I'm going
YouTube
to a
idiot.
training. I'm going to a training in just a couple of weeks. There's a USCCA home defense training one night. It's a free training. You get what you pay for. But I mean,
You
do you
get
think
what you
I'm do
pay
you think
for.
I'm going? Do you think I'm going because
I'd
you think
show
I'm
up
going to
with
learn
body armor
something
and
new?
try not to get shot.
You think I'm going because
Yeah.
I'm going to learn something new? I'm going because I'm trying to inspire other people to come with me. I'm going to go and sit through knowledge that I got 10 times better sitting at Thunder Ranch than I will ever get on a free Friday night class. But I want a handful of people that I love and care about to go, I'd like to take the first step toward thinking about this. And if I'm willing to go and sacrifice 2.5 hours of my time to go and listen to somebody, that maybe I can bring people with me. That's the only reason I'm going. So, I mean,
My only
there you go.
concern is, and again, I don't know your individual, I don't know anything about the training you're talking about, but be wary of friends not letting friends buy points. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Don't don't let your friend take bad training. People are moldable once
Mhm.
or twice for a little while,
Yep.
and then it becomes difficult to untrain your bad training. Um,
Well, the nice thing is,
but
USCCA training is not garbage training. It's better than the NRA ever put out. As far as
at a low bar.
there's a very low bar. It's
Yeah,
just rudimentary.
that's a
It's
very
just
low
very
bar.
basic. It's just very basic. It's not going to be anything spectacular, but it is going to be a first good first
I'd
step.
say pistol one, carbine one is hard to screw up, but I don't know that I can even say that with authority either. I've never been a pistol or carbine instructor. I've done a lot of range safety officer stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm a very competent RSO,
Right.
but I've taught concealed carry courses, but that's not the same as pistol one, pistol two, carbine, tactical courses.
Mhm.
So
Well,
just
I would say based on my own
all in.
experience, pistol one and carbine one are not tactical classes. They are
I
acquaintance
agree. They're
classes.
how
They
to
are
handle firearms without shooting
familiarization.
yourself and others.
They're
They are.
familiarization of a flat
Find out
range
if you're
scenario.
drunk.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Until you
Little to
get
no
to
movement
Right. Until you get to step into an actual shoot house where you get to slice the pie, you get to move corners, you get to look and identify targets
where
in
you
dark
can have
places.
threats from at least 3 directions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
From at least a 270-degree arc.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Until you experience that, you've gotten zero tactical training whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah. But there is a lot of prep to lead up towards that, because until you can move and shoot
Oh yeah.
safely, there's
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of skills to get to that point.
Well,
Which is
any
why we
school,
say, light vision's great, but you're not going to touch it for less than $4,000 to $5,000 unless you're buying junk. And you might be better served at this point buying 10,000 rounds for the
Yep.
same amount of money, because that's how much it costs now.
Agreed.
The best price I'm able to find at all is about 60 cents for quality 5.56, 60 cents a round. I'm up to about 45 cents a round for baby
Yep.
10 mil, which I shoot.
Yep.
I don't know what 9 mil costs, but it's about half that right now.
Mm-hmm.
And because I don't buy very much of that, I don't shoot it.
Yeah.
What else? Blackout, 300 blackout for stuff that'll
Expensive.
just function and cycle in the subsonic category.
It's expensive.
I can't seem to touch it for less than $1 a round. Yeah, $1 a round, and it's more commonly $20 to $1.50 a round.
Yep.
Which is man, that's tough to practice. That's tough.
Agreed.
So I can't even make it for less than about 60 cents a round, not counting existing stash. So
Sure.
anyway, so it's tough. Again, night vision is fun to play with, but and I'm not a night vision expert. I have used it
Right.
in a couple of different forms, from really old school, like 1 into 2 bad
Yeah.
green, hit your head, no no situational awareness, frustrating to use, like the stuff that you saw on TV in Desert Storm. That's
Yeah.
what I started with. And I always felt like it was absolute garbage. I was better off in the dark than to
Agreed.
have that stuff on,
Yeah.
especially for what I was doing with it. And then I've used the Radu quad tube white phos aviation stuff, where you're staring out the window, and it looks like you're looking in the daylight. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It is absolutely amazing. You still can't buy it as a civilian. I've used that. So
Sure.
I've used a bit of the range. But what I don't have a lot of time with is PVS 14s on my head moving through woods or houses and things like
Sure.
that. So when
Sure.
I did shoot house training, civilians didn't own NVGs, and it was a shoot house civilian training. It was very
Sure.
tactical. I mean,
Yeah.
but even SWAT team guys at that point weren't using NVGs effectively because they were kind of garbage, or what they could buy was garbage.
Sure.
So the world has changed.
Yeah.
The world has changed.
Yeah.
Nearly every single officer out there has at least 3rd generation white phos NVGs.
Yep.
Or at least a mono.
Yeah.
And arguably, depending on the application, the mono may be a better choice.
Yeah.
But the next thing to be considered is the third. I've done the recent. I have not pulled the plug yet. Have you pulled the plug yet on thermal?
No, but I
Or
know
you don't have to disclose
where
that.
I know where I'm gonna go. I don't want to announce that here because I want to test it before I make any recommendations. But yeah,
I recommend Pulsar.
Pulsar's
Right
really
now,
good stuff.
100% of my asking around and research online and watching is leading me towards Pulsar. So
Yeah.
there are various levels of Pulsar, and there arguably are perhaps just as good or similar other options. I'm not aware of that. I
Yeah.
don't endorse ATN because ATN is kind of like Leupold. They have a junk line and they have a good line.
Yep.
So it's
And
hard to know what to
if you're
recommend
not
in
paying really
ATN.
close attention and you're not doing the upper price point, you're wasting your money.
You are. Yeah. So, but
and it's quite Chinese
these are the
too.
tools
There's
that
a
the enemy is coming
lot of their
after with.
components are just made by China.
A lot of Chinese EM. Yeah, I actually Vortex would probably be a better comparison in that there is some high end Vortex stuff that doesn't suck.
Yeah.
And you might not have to use a warranty for it.
Right.
But the vast majority of their stuff is what pays for that, and it's Chinese junk that you're
Right.
going to warranty multiple times.
Right. Right. Ask me how I know. Yep. Yeah, I won't buy Vortex.
So yeah. That's where we're at. So I don't know where we're sitting at in the show. I think
Well, I was
must the
just getting
headlines
ready to
that
say
matter to me.
we're at our we're at our hour. Thanks for watching, listening to us, you guys. Just kind of rant about things in the world. I would say if you're not already started, you're in
Ammo?
really bad trouble. But you want
Armor?
armor. Yep.
Armor, ammo. Think about gas masks. I think you can still legitimately equip in the category of a gas mask.
Yep.
For about
Mira.
$1,000.
Mira
Be
is
very, very wary.
Yep.
MSA, Mira, yeah.
Yep.
But they also have junk lines.
They do.
They have the stuff out there that they're selling to the Antifa idiots.
Yep,
don't buy the cheaper stuff. Don't get suckered into it. And all of that stuff has expiration dates. So I just refreshed, canisters because they're getting hard to find.
Yep.
For the masks that I have because they don't make them anymore and they're getting to be up there in age.
Yep.
I'm having a hard time finding replacement seals because those things have about a 5 to 10 year life, and even if you grease them every year, they just don't last forever. They have a life limit, and I'm having a hard time finding replacement parts.
Agreed.
Which is making me sad because as I went to replace, wanting to buy parts, already those law enforcement. So we're talking the LA Police Gear, the Galls of the world.
Yep.
They will not sell gas mask components to civilians without not just proof of not just department ID. They want letterhead.
They want letterhead. That's right.
Which means permission chain of command. They want permission from your chain of command to make the purchases. They won't sell you skills. They won't sell you canisters. They won't say any of that.
Correct.
The lockdown is coming. Galls has already limited for a long time who they would sell armor to and things like that.
Absolutely, they have. Yeah. So you got to be
that's
really
spreading. That is
you got to be really, really careful with that kind of stuff. So, hey, maybe next week we can break down some armor brands that we trust and like, and those kinds of things. That would be really good. I've got a couple recommendations.
We're down to one right now.
Huh?
Down to one. I'm down to one. I recommend Spartan, 100%. And again, that's just for plates. There's a lot of good places to get carriers.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking for armor, I recommend
carriers
Spartan.
are a
They're actually 30% sale today.
Yeah.
30% is not a common sale for them. 10 to 15 is. So Spartan Armor right now has 30% off sales. These days you want multi-hit level 4. Don't mess around with anything else. Ceramic,
that's for sure.
Multi-hit level 4.
That's right.
Buy from a quality armor. The cost, even with Spartan, is a solid 30 to 40% more than it was a year ago, which is why they're able to give you that 30% coupon. But today only 30% sale. I would hit it up.
Go check that out, folks.
Hit it up.
All right, everybody. Phil, thanks for hanging out with me. We'll see you guys next week. And are we live next week?
It's first Friday of the month, isn't it? Yeah.
Yep. So we're live next week.
It's on my calendar, so I'm good with it.
All right, everybody. You guys have a great day. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.